Hello from IBM TV, International Broadcast Media. This is the Lawyer's Den. This unique broadcast brings you in-depth discussions with American legal scholars to discuss the current issues facing our nation. I am Bill Tresvant, and along with my pleasant and understated Southern colleague, Nick Palavita, we're your co-hosts for this show. Nick, will you please do the honors of introducing our guests?
Yes, I will. And the first person from the Den hails from the Salt Lake City area, who is also a JDL attorney and also licensed before the Supreme Court of the United States. We would like to bring in from our friend from Salt Lake City, Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Good to be here again.
Excellent.
Your fan club's showing up late. Okay. But a person who has an extremely large fan club, as we well know, is actually a professor at Georgia, and I think it's Georgia State, something like that. University College, Georgia. Anyway, he's a professor of law in Georgia, but he also graduated from the University of Southern California, received his law degree at The Ohio State University, and his master's in law from New York University. Let's welcome our person that has a huge fan club that we all know of, Adam Lamparello. We know your fan club always is here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Right. We'll talk about your fan club later on in the program. Maybe there's an Adam fan club out there somewhere, but we tend to hear from them a lot. Now, a person that needs no introduction, but actually is a graduate of Columbia University School of Law and also the Illinois Institute of Technology, spending his time toiling in appellate law, which means that he talks to judges all the time. Let's bring in our favorite, Frederick Grine. Frederick, welcome to the show.
Okay. Just as an initial observation, it occurs to me that Nick, Jeff, you guys are outnumbered because at least three of us have spent time in the Big Apple, and you two apparently have not, for whatever reason.
Are you talking about me, sir, kind sir?
Yes, sir.
Well, the thing is, obviously, you misread my background, as I had actually a home in Greenwich, along with a home in Boca, along with two other homes back then in the 1990s. I worked in New York City for 5 years. So with that, because I worked in New York City for 5 years, yes, I know where Mineola is. And yes, I know where Fordham University is. And yes, I know where Hofstra University is. And yes, I worked in Garden City as well as Manhattan, as well as Greenwich. And also we have an attorney from the Big Banana. Let's bring in our Big Banana attorney for the first time on the show, Fernando Leal. Welcome to the Lawyer's Den. Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
We were just talking about you and the Big Banana, and of course we have Jeff Teichert from Salt Lake City, a JDLM attorney. We have Professor Adam Lamparello, who's an attorney, also a JDLM. I'm a JDLM attorney, and then we have the regular crew. And Frederick actually went to Columbia University Law School right down the street from where you're at. And Bill.
Nice.
Yeah, Bill just hangs out in Washington, D.C. with the mud pool. I don't get that.
Well, no. Actually, I brought backup this time because I'm not going to be outgunned anymore. And we're going to demonstrate that we're going to represent the State University of New York at Buffalo School of Law, which is the top school for litigators coming from the great state, the Empire State of New York. And my good friend, my college buddy, my fraternity buddy, and my law school alum buddy, Fernando Leal, who is an actual attorney from the Big Apple. So the rest of you guys, he comes sharp with his arguments. So I guess you guys come sharp. And I was really concerned about this. So I just want to add one more thing before we start the show, and that is, Adam, I skipped my bow tie today to wear this one because you know what this is? It glared out to me in my closet because it's a Jerry Garcia tie, and I figured that's how you practice law. You're one of those hippies, man, from the 70s. The music that you just can't figure out. It's like the Grateful Dead, just like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the dead Constitution that you worship, rather than the living Constitution that I worship. Now,
you better be careful when you talk to Adam. His fan club will be all over you.
I'm a combination of Elvis Presley and Iron Maiden.
Oh my God.
You know. Okay, I'm going to give them all your email address so you can send you. They send you e-flames and send me e-flames.
Yeah, I will defend it because now I have Fernando, and you guys are really
You're going to need all the defense you can get, baby, and you're going to need to bring Fernando needs to bring his A game to the lawyer's den. Otherwise, he's going to be eaten alive inside this den.
Then let me just set the ground rule. Fernando, is it your intention at any point in this program to raise any kind of defense on my behalf?
It all depends on what your position is.
Oh, okay.
If I align with you, sure, I'll defend you. But if you're out there with some of this nonsense that you've been quoting since college, then no.
Yes.
And you also need a 49ers. You also need a 49ers helmet back there with your Buffalo Bills helmet. You need to represent your city of San Francisco.
Okay, so we just moved Fernando way to the right of you because we thought he was going to defend you. He's going to be with Jeff eating you for lunch, Bill. So just get used to it.
Okay, well, listen, we have a very interesting, we have two topics and we have an optional topic. The first of which is, and it's really beginning to gather steam, and Nick, it was something that you raised quite some time ago. And here on IBM TV, where we actually do talk about the serious issues, you first raised this notion of what obligations attorneys have as officers of the court. And recently, with all of these lawsuits that have been filed claiming massive fraud and irregularities and outright theft of this election, the judges have now gotten to the game, and they are starting to question attorneys very acutely in federal court. In fact, in one exchange that I read in a federal district court in Pennsylvania, the federal district judge paused when the argument was a bit thin, let's just say, and asked the attorney outright, said, quote, "I am asking you a direct question as an officer of this court," end quote. And then you know what the attorney said? Then you're right, Your Honor. The answer is no. I'm not suggesting that there's fraud with regard to these ballots. And then the case was dismissed. Now, the question is, they have been sending this stuff out. There are stories everywhere. We've got the American people following all of this nonsense. Great, the lawyers are getting paid, but isn't it doing a disservice to this entire process? Now, Fernando, since you're the new kid on the block, what do you think, coming from New York?
Well, what I think is that you kind of mischaracterized what the attorney said. He said what all of us say when we have a client that's kind of a lunatic. To the best of my knowledge, the answer is no, which means that later on I can come in, if I get evidence, to say, hey, here's the evidence. It's an argument that I've made plenty of times when I have clients who sit there and go on Facebook and start hemming and hawing because they're defendants in a personal injury action, or when I have a plaintiff in a personal injury action who's sitting there saying how they can't work, they can't lift weights, and then all of a sudden they post a video on Facebook deadlifting 565 pounds. You know, it happens. You know, at UB, what did our ethics professor tell us? Sure. Your enemy is your client, not your adversary. It is your client that will always sink you. It is your client that will always sue you. Correct, right? So they didn't do, they were hired to represent a side, right? Like all of us are. Yeah. They went in, they put their papers, then they came and they argued. They were asked. He was honest and said, to the best of his knowledge, no.
No.
That's what we do.
No, he was only honest after the judge cornered him and said, I'm not talking to you.
He was not cornered, because I read the same transcript and the same article that you read.
Right.
And I've been part of those conversations myself in court where they're like, listen, did your guy sweep the floor, yes or no? I'm like, look, to the best of my knowledge, he's telling me he did. There's a mountain of evidence on the plaintiff's side that's saying, hey, he hasn't cleaned that hallway in 5 years, but I have to go with what my client tells me because that's who I'm representing. I also can't sit there and sell them down the river because that's another layer of ethical issues and malpractice lawsuits, right? So you find the middle ground. And all of us that have gone to court have all done the same thing because we've all had clients like Trump. They may not be as rich, but they are just as crazy. Well, and not for nothing, what people forget is that what Trump is doing is straight out of the Roy Cohn handbook. Those of us who know who Roy Cohn is, who was Senator McCarthy's right-hand man, his way of doing things was to litigate everything, whether it was true, not true, whatever, just flood it all in the courts, bang people over the head, See if they just give up, walk away, do whatever. And Trump is a disciple of Cohen. Cohen took him under his wing back in the 70s. You know,
Right.
he's following what he's learned.
Well, no, that's true. Not to say that he's smart, but that's true. And I can tell you, nobody walks away from the presidency except maybe for Richard Nixon. And clearly
Correct.
Trump is not clinging on. So, Nick, do you want to frame this in a way that the rest of your LLMs can understand that what Fernando and I understand to be from the real world, the boots on the ground, having to make an argument?
But see, what I don't understand from this august panel is how many people and how aggressive these attorneys really are, and how aggressive the judges are. Now, yours truly usually gets is a pretty aggressive in front of court, which is one reason I stay away from it, because I usually get sanctions and motions for contempt and all this other stuff. I've had asked the judge to recuse himself, and I mean, I got a big fight with the judge. But my question are: these other attorneys and judges are just playing footsies, or do the judges actually decide to do sanctions, baby? Once they do sanctions, that changes the whole game. Because I watched a lot of other attorneys, the minute they get sanctions, they're wimps. They're scared. Oh, I got the sanction against me. They run to the corner. You know, and again, I don't know what Fernando's experience is, but do judges in New York sanction attorneys for this stuff, or do they just play footsies with each other?
It's very rare that you get sanctioned. It has to be really egregious. Okay. I mean, like when the judge asks you, is there fraud, and you stand up and start waving your fist and you say yes when you know there isn't, chances are you're probably going to get sanctioned. But if you sit there, everybody understands that you're going to file, that you have to file a complaint. Let's face it. I tell juries all the time that a complaint is nothing more than a piece of paper with some vague allegations. It doesn't count for anything. When I'm on the defense side, when I'm on the plaintiff side, I wave the complaint and say it's the greatest piece of paper ever drafted. And, you know, that's it. Pay me.
It's the Bible.
Right. It's a Bible. This is it. Whatever this defense guy says, he's crazy.
But come on.
But when you're confronted, when you're confronted here in New York, I don't know about any other jurisdiction.
Right.
Unless you out and outright lie and they know you're lying, chances of you getting sanctioned are rare. It's happened.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
so
there was
New York, they
happens.
sound tough, but they don't play tough. I remember Judge Silvertooth in Florida, who's probably dead now, used to play pretty tough. So the thing is, that was his name. What can I tell you? I mean,
Nick, it depends on the case, because I have a friend who was part of a trial where the defense attorney went overboard in some of the stuff that they said in closing, which is usually where you can kind of get away with most of what you know, with a lot. Let's just say that, because it's not evidence. And, you know, my friend went and filed the motion. The guy got sanctioned. It went up to the appellate division and it was upheld. So they said, you just can't say what you said. You can't, we understand you can embellish, but you can't out and outright just lie and make stuff up and call your adversary an idiot, which is pretty much what the guy did.
The thing is, can you, but see what gets me, you just can't bring delusional affidavits before the court and have the court expect somebody go on a fishing expedition based on a bunch of delusional affidavits. At some point in time, this nonsense has to stop, Fernando.
They get tossed.
And it's up to the judge to put a slam. I'm waiting for them to slam Porter Ryder Jones Day. I mean, they collected what, 20 million off this stuff? And got nowhere.
Yeah, one collected 20, the other firm collected 10 million over the last 12 months from a variety of places.
I mean, and the thing is, for doing what? What have they accomplished except basically disparage the legal system in such a fashion? And there's only one person can stop, and that's the bloody judge. And the bloody judge, all it needs to do is say, sanctions, baby. And then all the gamesmanship will stop. The only question is which judge has the because the one I practice in front of Kolzinski up in the Ninth Circuit. You're probably familiar with Fred because you did a lot of appellate work. I mean, the guy had a little angst behind him, you know. But some of the other ones are like, you know, maybe you know, you need a judge to put the hammer down and stop it.
Okay. Well, Jeff, because you've been known to make the arguments. See, and for our audience, there really is a two-tier system here. There is Nick and Fernando and myself and Jeff, and we've actually stepped in and had to make arguments to develop the facts. Now Adam and Fred, they take the mess that we create at the trial level, and then they put the veneer of scholarly work on it and somehow catch us from falling at the appellate level and then before the Supreme Court. But very rarely do we get to the Supreme Court. Even Nick, wasn't even allowed to argue in front of the Supreme Court. But
I got to the Supreme Court case. I told Golzanski, the head chief judge of the Ninth Circuit, that he was wrong. And you should have seen the look on his face when then he found out he was wrong. And so it went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Did you argue the case?
I probably shouldn't have used those words, in front of the chief judge. But that's what I told him. I said, look, you're wrong.
Jeff, what happens when your client corners you and asks you to file something or represent something that you just don't have the evidence for? 1, 2, and should you be sanctioned? Or should you actually, do you have an affirmative ethical obligation to stop representing that client, Jeff?
Well, there's a couple of things at work. Of course, Rule 11, which we've talked about before on this program, under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and most states as well, states that when you sign a document, and the attorney always signs the complaint, that you have a good faith basis for believing that the allegations you're making are true. Now, it is also well established that you have a right to believe the reasonable representations that your client makes. I mean, they can't necessarily say they saw someone walk into their house that had just landed from Mars, but you have you're entitled to believe your client. And so that's a second principle. I have kind of a conundrum about the way that we're setting this up, because I think there's another issue that is at work. One is we've got a very high profile case here involving a presidential election, and any legal action that goes anywhere is going to be hugely public. And it's going to involve, as has been stated, the law firms that have got large amounts of money. And I think, if in those situations, anything that a judge does to sanction either party for not having a good faith basis for their argument, it can be seen very politically. It may be taken as political, even if it's not. Well, who appointed that judge? Oh, it was President Clinton. Got it. I think it could have the effect of politicizing the courts in a way that I don't know that I want to see. I think also, if there are issues.
No, Jeff, on this very show, both you and Adam have argued at length, ad nauseum. I've had to listen time and time again that these people are lifetime appointees and that they are above politics simply because they have a lifetime job. And that therefore, once they take that oath and take that lifetime tenure, they are no longer bound by the mere vagaries and problems of us mere mortals here on earth. Rather, that their robe invests them with an aura of sanctified, justice. And we're not worried about it. Now you're saying, oh, poor judges. Because if you're saying, oh, poor judges, oh, they're going to be all worried, and then somehow that is stopping them from applying the law as necessary and as needed, then what's your argument before? Is the first argument wrong, that somehow they change because they're shrouded in this untouchability? Or is your second argument true, that, oh, well, they're scared and therefore they can't enforce the law because they're fearful because it might be political? Isn't that the whole reason for an independent judiciary, Jeff?
Well, I think that's part of the reason for an independent judiciary. I'm just suggesting that in such a high-profile case, to award sanctions against an attorney for one side or the other may be seen as political. Also, I have issues with the way this might look when you're talking about a much more obscure, less well-known case. I mean, I've had it happen. Anybody who's litigated for any length of time probably has, and it's the thing I hate most in practicing law. But where I'm in the middle of a hearing in the courtroom and some piece of evidence gets dropped on me like a bombshell, and I find out that something my client told me is not true.
Right.
I've experienced this recently. And it was something I hung my hat on the whole time, and I found out that it was not correct. Now, should I be sanctioned for that? Well, I have the right to believe my client, until I have evidence that what they told me isn't true. But I worry about the idea, the chilling effect that it would have on not only the legal profession, but on people's ability to try to get justice if we're going around sanctioning attorneys every time they bring a case without a huge amount of evidence.
Okay. Adam, Jeff is defending lawyers, and you have to love that thick legal line of defense that we all have. Being afraid for lawyers, because now suddenly lawyers are wallflowers. The question is, giving lawyers the benefit of the doubt and protecting them and making sure that they can then go off and zealously, represent their client. Isn't that doing damage to the American people and a disservice to our democracy in this instance? With all of these cases of fraudulent complaints over voter fraud, Adam, in the real world, because please, I know you're not that disconnected, that you're not looking at the impact and the effects.
Well, I just want to start off by saying that I have tried repeatedly to help. But once again, it seems like everybody's drowning in the penumbras once again. So let me just make a few points. Number one, Trump is entitled to invoke the judicial process, as is any person in the legal system. Number two, America's reputation and standing in the world has been damaged by many things which predate and which will postdate Trump. That includes the horrendous bias in the media, CEG, CNN, and MSNBC. Number two, the tens of millions of low information voters that go into a voting booth, or shall I say wander into a voting booth, not knowing who they're voting for or why. Number three, the woke community that claims to be for diversity and inclusion, such as in academia, yet excludes anybody who doesn't think like them and therefore discriminates. The prevalence of this notion called implicit bias, which empirical studies show has no relation to actual biased behavior. And let me just turn to a few other things. How about George W. Bush taking us into a needless war? The 1960 election being stolen from Richard Nixon, Watergate, Monica Lewinsky. To say that Trump is a lunatic, in my opinion, is ridiculous. Trump is just, I have met so many people who are worse than Trump. Trump is garden variety. When it comes to dealing with people in corporate America, some good, some bad. But the lineage of horrible things that have damaged this country's reputation, like I said, predates and will postdate Trump. So I urge you to levitate from the penumbras and come back to reality, or else originalists are happy and proud.
Oh, it's amazing to see the guy sits on his ivory tower and pontificates about the dump. I mean, the Trump. Okay.
I love soapboxes.
Frederick, got to get to Frederick. Frederick.
Right.
Wow, I think we've just been, I've been slapped down. Frederick, you get to come in with the forethought of everybody else's position. Where are you coming down on this?
Okay, I think Trump is not just another shady politician who stretches the truth. I mean, the guy's been documented to have lied over 20,000 times as president. The Washington Post keeps a running count. He's an extraordinarily mendacious person, and he's shredding all the norms that any other president follows. I would note that Fernando made reference to Trump's beloved former attorney, Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn actually got disbarred a few months before he died. So, and this is a guy that Trump adores. He holds Roy Cohn up as the gold standard of what an attorney should be. So that tells you a lot, I think. Now, this, of course, is not a personal injury case. Donald Trump has no firsthand knowledge of any alleged fraud. So you have to come up with some sort of evidence of fraud. And the Trump lawyers seem to have signally failed to do that in any of these cases. They recently presented the affidavit of a Pennsylvania postal worker about supposed irregularities, and the postal worker a day or two admitted that, oh yes, he perjured himself, he lied under oath. So the Trump lawyers are skating perilously close to the line here. if not in fact crossing it.
See, and that is why you are brilliant. You are absolutely brilliant, Frederick. Because on top of that,
Thank you.
and because we have to stick together as mere JDs. But here's the other thing: the lieutenant governor of Texas has offered $1 million to anybody for evidence of fraud. Now, you would think getting a bounty of $1 million just to say, you would think actually in the article that I read, it raised this question, and the question was. It was intriguing, and it was, well, if somebody came forward and said, I am the evidence of the fraud, that is to say, I voted illegally and without being registered, that person would clearly go to jail. That would be evidence of the fraud. But could I collect $1 million from the lieutenant governor while I'm sitting in jail? Now, it just seems to me that very question begs the absurdity of all of Trump's claims. Fernando?
What's your question? Because what you do is just babble in a circle, but what's your question?
You heard the diatribe.
Right, what's your question?
Box statements, but what's your questions, Counselor?
I'm going to do to you what judges do to me, Counselor. What's your point? What's your question?
What's your question, Counselor?
Yeah, because you haven't asked the question. Okay. You made a statement.
He was enjoying his soapbox.
I kind of was.
And Adam, good job. I'm glad you put him down a little bit. I'm tired of doing it for 32 years.
Yeah, you can't. So this way, Fernando had to be the only person in town. Yeah.
Listen, this is the question. Isn't all of these shenanigans by the lawyer skating on thin ice, undermining our very American democracy and further sowing the seeds for Adams' wandering voters who don't even have faith in the system to begin with because they tend to believe everything else that's going on? And by Adams' own admission, these low IQ people are just going to say, whoop, the whole
He said low information people.
Low information.
He didn't attack
Thank you, Nick.
You love to misquote. You did the same thing to Jeff.
Listen carefully, Counselor, to the statements that are made. Do not interject words that do not exist, Counselor.
Actually,
I'm taking Fernando's job away from him. Sorry.
You kind of
about it, Nick.
You kind of are, but anyway, that's the question, Fernando. And by the way, I was making a zealous argument. Unless you're going to sanction me, Nick, then I think I'm allowed to make an argument on behalf of my client.
How many Diet Cokes do you want to give me now? Come on, go on,
Fernando.
You can make a zealous argument as long as you don't misrepresent what people say, like you did to Adam and Jeff. They are skating on thin ice, but in all honesty, in a lot of litigation, a lot of times when you take cases, you're skating on thin ice, and it isn't until you start developing the facts that you kind of figure it out. I've had cases where people have written things on affidavits. They've given it to me. I present it. All of a sudden, they show up at a deposition, and it's complete opposite to what the affidavit says, and now I'm kind of screwed. It happens. And that's part of the risk of litigation. At that point, as the attorney, now you should step back, pull your client aside, and said, "Hey, which one is it?" And if you can't get a clear answer, then you should. The ethical thing, at least what I do, is I say, "Look, I'm not representing you anymore. You need to go find another attorney. I still owe a lot of money in student loans. I'm too old to go dig ditches or become a cop or a fireman, or join the FBI." I'm letting you know right now, I'm making a motion to be relieved as counsel. I'll let you know the date. You can come in. You can argue against me if you feel like it. I don't care. But I'm telling you, I'm not going to be your lawyer anymore. You start looking.
See, Nick, in a New York minute, they come and they go. Nick, what are your thoughts then?
Well, I think the big circuit, because remember, that this guy Trump that we're talking about is highly litigious. What is he involved in? 3,500 lawsuits. Okay,
not to cut you off, Nick. If you walk into the commercial part when he was still doing construction and stuff,
right?
It's the calendar's full of his cases where he doesn't want to pay plumbers, electricians, this guy, that guy wants to breach contracts, so on and so forth.
Right.
And it's kind of part and parcel of the nature of commercial litigation and construction.
But he's
not just him, but he doesn't want to pay anybody, and he wants to get out of it.
He's a real estate slumlord, basically. Yep. And now he's a high-end real estate slumlord. I used to have a lot of real estate developers and slumlords as clients, so I'm totally familiar with that dirt mentality. Okay, now I've pushed my practice away from these people, and I don't deal with them anymore. I'm very fortunate I don't have to deal with them anymore. But I know the mentality, Fernando. And so the thing is, but I also know that the judges need to step to the plate and start whacking some of these attorneys around that are your white-shoed law firms that live in high rent district, that are bringing cases that have affidavits signed by some lunatic over there that they have done no investigation whatsoever, and they need to be slapped around with some sanctions. And I've had to go against all these people. And here's the deal, though. Well, my partner used to be head of the bar association, or my former partner is a judge. I mean, it's all stuff like that goes on, and so therefore we're not going to sanction them. Seriously, somebody needs to step to the table and step up, grow up, and sanction these buddies, and sanction them big time. And this will stop all the nonsense. And that's the reason why Trump keeps going through. Cohen, you said, hey, he was disbarred before he died. He should have been disbarred decades ago. And so, but the thing is, the bar associations and the judges need to step to the plate on this one.
Okay. Well, I think that we're all generally in agreement for different reasons, with the exception of the outlier that is Adam, and that's why he's, who knows what he's doing today. But there is another very important issue that's beginning to rear its ugly head that I think that we ought to begin to talk about. And gentlemen, that's immigration. The Biden campaign announced that they were taking dramatic steps and essentially, Nick, ruling by executive order, or fiat, as it were, in a very efficient manner, to undo any number of things that Trump has done. First and foremost, let's talk about the potential invasion. The Biden administration is going to reverse Trump's order that requires those seeking asylum to remain in Mexico for pending the resolution of their case. Biden's executive order is going to allow them into the United States. Let's start with that. Nick, what do you think of that reversal?
Well, I think number one, we're missing our subject matter expert, Guidry, who practices immigration law. So we need to send her a message that we're going to be discussing immigration cases. She's down in Miami, a J.D. Ellum attorney that could opine better than I could. But just generally, the immigration laws are a mess. And one real problem that I've had with it for years is this statute of limitations. Now, I don't know, Adam, being an originalist, who's going to jump up and say, yeah, they should have it, or jump up and say, no, they shouldn't. But the thing is, almost every crime out there has a statute of limitations. Assault. Well, after 2 years, if they don't catch you, you're forgiven. Battery, the same thing. A lot of things have a statute of limitation. A lot of our crimes, almost every one except rape, murder, and immigrating to the United States. Come on, that's not equivalent. And we would eliminate a lot of this nonsense if we had a 5-year statute, a 10-year statute. If the person comes here, even if it's illegal, forgiven. And the statute of limitations go back far, far into old English jurisprudence. When I studied at Oxford University, they were teaching, the common law of England applies into the United States, but not the statute of limitations when it comes to immigration. So it'd be very interesting to see the comments from Jeff, who is a constitutional law scholar, and Adam, who I have no idea what he's going to opine on using the statute of limitations, since he's a liberal originalist, which doesn't make any sense at all.
No, we're going to Jeff. Jeff, you have your specialty, your LLM is exactly in this area. So please let us know about statute of limitations.
Well, I don't find any statute of limitations in the federal Constitution. So I don't know that element of the common law somehow applies unless there's a particular provision that brings it in or gives us a context in which to interpret it. I will say on executive orders, when we go back to England and think about what was being done there and some of the things we rebelled against in the United States, I remember President Obama saying at one point very emphatically, I've got a phone and I've got a pen, and I'm going to take my pen and my phone and I'm going to fix this. And he did that as far as he thought he could with immigration. And he finally said, I've done everything I can without Congress. I can't do any more. I'm not a king. And then he got a lot of pushback from some of his constituents, and we got DACA. And there's a lot of things in DACA that I may agree with, but I don't think he had the power to do it by with the stroke of a pen or with his phone, however he uses that. And so I have issues with a lot of the executive action presidents have taken of both parties going back, the last century. And in England, that is what a king would do. They would govern by royal proclamation, except when it came to spending money, and then they needed to have parliament. And kings were deposed for spending money without consent of parliament, and raising taxes as well.
Okay.
So I have problems with doing all of this by executive order. I really do. I think you're going to see Biden undo a lot of what Trump has done. And
Okay. No, that's fine. Frederick, what do you make of the situation and Biden's potential to begin to address the issue of immigration through executive orders?
Well, I suppose if Trump did X by executive order, I guess Biden can do not X by executive order. And unless the Democrats pull an inside straight and win both of those Georgia seats in the runoff, those Georgia Senate seats, which would give them 50-50 split in the Senate, allowing Vice President Harris to break the tie. And unless that happens, I dare say Biden is going to be trying to govern by executive order as much as he can, since I don't foresee a lot of cooperation coming from Mitch McConnell. Seems an unfortunate thing.
Okay. All right. Well, Fernando, what do you make of the executive orders and immigration and the mess that we're in? How are you kind of looking at the situation?
Like any CEO, which is what the president is, he's going to come in and he's going to undo what the last CEO did on the areas that he doesn't like. Now, one of the ones that's probably going to be a problem is the one that's, and I forgot the name right now, where you're denied citizenship. You're denied your green card if you're on public assistance.
Oh, okay.
That one, if I understood correctly when it was printed in the Law Journal, it had to go through agency approvals and hearings to get it done. That one's probably going to be a little bit harder to get undone. What I have never understood is we have an entire federal code of immigration laws and statutes. How about you just try enforcing those? Let's start with those steps. I'm not, if you're here illegally, in my book, you need to be deported. It's pretty simple for me. And this is coming from somebody who's a first-generation American. My parents came here, paid the fees that they had to pay. They came in legally. They did what they had to do. My dad waited 12 years to see his mother and his sister, his mom was his only parent because my grandfather died of a heart attack in his sleep. So if my dad can wait 12 years, guess what? You can wait to get here legally. And if you're here illegally, then you should be taking steps to make yourself legal, whatever those steps are available. And I know some of the arguments are, oh, they don't have the money. They don't have this. They don't have that. In all honesty, they have the money to go buy false documents on Roosevelt Avenue under the 7 train so that they can start businesses. And then they start businesses and then they buy houses and then they send their money home. So instead of doing all of that, how about you use that money to get yourself legal and then pursue everything else that you want to do? That's, DACA I don't have an issue with, because if your parents, in essence, smuggled you here and now you're stuck here and you came in as an infant or a 1-year-old, you really didn't have a choice in the matter. So now you're here illegally. We got to kind of do something to fix that. So I agree with that executive order. They should figure out a way to make it an actual law. Then comes the issue of now we got to figure out how to get the parents legal also. And there's what, DAPA or whatever the acronym is, which is the equivalent of DACA. Fine. You got to provide some sort of pathway to make them legal. If these, and if you provide a pathway and they still continue to stay legal and skirt the laws, they need to be deported. President Bush provided paths to citizenship. Were they used? Probably not. Going back to Ronald Reagan, he provided paths to citizenships. Were they used? Maybe yes, maybe no. The issue is we have all these laws on the book. Every single president that comes in wants to reinvent the wheel. And I want to be the one that fixed the mess. You're not going to reinvent the wheel. You're not going to fix the mess. Just start enforcing what's on the books.
Okay, Adam.
Well,
Okay, go. Sorry, buddy.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I have 3 thoughts on immigration, but before I get to that, I just want to say that, quite frankly, I am so sick and tired of people calling Trump things like lunatic, a horrible human being. This man has been attacked from the second he got into the presidency, and I'm curious if anybody who's made those attacks knows him personally, or if they're making their judgments based on what they read in the Washington Post or the New York Times. Everybody has their flaws. But I think a little less judgment is probably a good way to bring more civility back into this country. Now, regarding immigration, and by the way, who signed into law the First Step Act? Who increased funding for historically black colleges by 30%? Trump. Now, I'm not even a Trump supporter, so it's a unique position that I'm defending him, nor am I a Biden supporter. But regarding immigration, I would say 3 quick things. Number 1, you absolutely have to secure the border. Number 2, for the undocumented immigrants that are here, I would give them a pathway to citizenship, provided that they have not engaged in any, felonies or been convicted of certain types of felonies. I don't think ICE should be going around deporting people, breaking up families, and the like. Number 3, I find it funny how the Democrats were so upset about Trump's use of the executive power, but now that they're in office, they just are so ready to use that very power that they previously condemned. It's hypocrisy at its height. And that's why I'm an independent. And that's why I didn't vote for either candidate. And I don't think Joe Biden is going to solve any problems either.
Okay, there's coaches tonight. Look at you guys. Nick, can you help us make some sense of this? What are your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I was going to answer Jeff's thing saying the statute of limitations is not in the Constitution, and this will give Adam some more firepower about the statute of limitations. It isn't. It is in what we call the reception statutes, which all states in the United States have adopted the common law as it applies to England, including the statute of limitations. The reason it doesn't apply to immigration, the states adopted it, the federal government didn't, and immigration is a federal law. So here we run into this problem that we see is that if you come here illegally, you do not get the benefit of the statute of limitations, which I think is wrong because it applies to every other crime. And then you have your purists like Fernando. Well, you commit a crime, they should be deported. Well, let's not make it a crime then, Fernando. Then they won't be deported, and that will make you happy because of the thing. And you can easily eliminate that by putting in the statute of limitations. So then the purists say, "Oh, well, he committed a crime, he should be deported." No, they shouldn't. This is a nation built on immigrants, and some of these people, they came here. Yeah, they came here illegally. Yeah, they committed a crime, but so do a lot of criminals in the United States. And some of these people that are here since they got here have never committed a crime since they got here, and you're going to deport them. Yeah, well, that. I'm sorry, sir, that is wrong, and that's the reason we have statute of limitations for all crimes except murder and rape. Okay, and immigration, and that needs to be changed. We need to have a conversation about that. Mr. Fernando. And who cares how your parents got here? I mean, that is history, buddy, and no one really cares. That's anecdotal evidence. No one really cares about that stuff.
Wow.
Well, maybe it's anecdotal evidence, but they did it legally, and that's the point.
So what? Did they get a prize?
Hold on. No. I let you talk. The fact that you come in here illegally, you're committing a crime. That's the actual crime. So to try and obfuscate the argument by saying that, oh, they didn't commit any crime, they should stay. No, the actual crime is coming in illegally. And if you're here illegally and you're not doing anything to become a citizen, you get deported. That's the punishment for breaking the law, for coming in illegally, for being here illegally. Not undocumented. That's just another nonsense word made up by the media. And the other thing that I have an issue with is the following. Biden was vice president for 8 years under Obama. He was supposedly Obama appointment to head immigration and fix it. What did he do in 7 years? He already had 8 years as a vice president to do something, right? He didn't fix it then. He isn't going to fix it now. And I find it real interesting how under Trump, there was all this stuff about cages and kids in cages and blah, 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 right? All those cages started when Obama was president and Biden was the guy running his immigration policy. Nobody's mentioned cages ever again since Trump lost the election. Right?
Well said.
Right? So it's complete and utter nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. And a lot of it is media generated. Who's ever in, if their person is in who they like, they don't say anything. If the person that they don't like is in, now all of a sudden immigration becomes this hot button issue.
Okay, Adam.
And again, Nick, if you're here illegally, that's the actual crime, not the
know,
murder, not rape. And I
I
understand these are nice, hardworking people. I grew up amongst a lot of them. And I'll still tell you, and I told them, you're here illegally, you should be deported,
Yeah, but
whether
Counselor,
they like it or not.
about the statute of limitations. Somebody goes and robs your house. Okay, 5 years from now, they go to the judge and say, you know, I robbed his house, but he can't be prosecuted because a statute of limitation applies.
Okay.
Somebody immigrates illegally. 5 years from now, they say, I immigrated illegally, and they deport him. It is wrong. Okay, because the thing is,
It's not wrong in my book.
well, the
They
thing
broke
is,
the law. They broke the law by getting here, period.
first guy broke the law.
5 years from now, they're not still in your house.
Right.
The guy stole money from your house 5 years ago. He broke the law too, and you're going to let him walk because of statute of limitations. The other guy just crossed the border, and he doesn't get to walk. The statute of limitations has been around for decades. It exists in Old English common law for a reason, and we don't have an immigration, and that's wrong. And we should have a statute of limitations.
Fernando, and then we'll go to you, Jeff. But Fernando.
Mm-hmm.
No, so he's talking
Yeah,
about
I'm listening.
law. Do we really care about what happened in England? After all, wasn't that the point of the revolution, was to get rid of them?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't care what English common law has to say. As a matter of fact, when I was in law school, that they would teach that you start off with English common law, I would get up and walk out because I don't care. That's the whole point why we have a constitution which constitutes a brand new form of government. So whatever the English did back in the 1500s and the 1400s, I don't care. Hey, how about we go look at Spanish common law or French common law or you know, Italian common law when the princes and kings were running things. Who cares? We're talking about now. Not what happened way back then, not what they did back then, or what England does now. It's what we're doing. It's what our system is.
Okay.
And our system doesn't have a statute of limitation for immigration. If they want to pass one, great.
Good.
I'm not for it, but guess what?
Okay.
If that's what Congress decides to do, then that's what Congress decides to do. As of right now, there is no statute of limitation. As such, the same way a murderer can be prosecuted, you know, at the age of 90 and he committed a murder at the age of 15, guess what? You came in here illegally and we catch you later on. No matter what, you should be deported. I don't care what good you've done, especially if there's been passive citizenship that you did not take advantage of.
Oh, that's a double crime. Okay, well, first, Adam, I think he just quoted you because if it's not in the Constitution, then who cares about it? So that's a point for you. But Jeff, I'm going to come to you because really, your area was Old English law, and Fernando just said he doesn't care about it because we constituted ourselves with our Constitution. So Jeff, what do you have to say? Because I guess that year at George Washington University was a complete waste of time when you got your LLM. Jeff?
Well, a couple things. I think we resort to English common law to interpret the Constitution on questions like, what does cruel and unusual punishment mean? There was a tradition in English common law that defined what that was, going clear back to the Magna Carta. We can go to a number of different things within the Constitution that had reference to English common law. So I wouldn't throw that out. But I don't think, using Adam's favorite word, that English common law somehow arises in the penumbras of the Constitution. It's a useful tool of interpretation, and it can be used to interpret the words of the Constitution. It doesn't create stuff that never existed and was never put in the Constitution to start with. Secondly, I agree with Fernando about DACA in terms of policy. I dealt with this as a practicing attorney in Provo, Utah several years ago. I handled several immigration cases, but I had a number of people come in to see me in my office and tell me, I want to somehow get legal in this country. I was brought here when I was 3 years old by my parents. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know anything about the culture of Mexico. I graduated from an American high school. On a policy level, that person, as far as I'm concerned, is as American as you or me, and we ought to keep them. My problem is in doing that by executive order. I want to also do what Fernando suggests, which is pass a reform into law that legalizes those people, not necessarily their parents or whoever brought them here illegally. Deport those people and make them get in line. But the kids that are 19, 20 years old now that still can't get a job and are living in the shadows through no fault of their own, I believe it's inhumane to think about sending those people back, putting them out on the streets of Tijuana and saying good luck. So as a practical matter, that's the policy position, but I think we need to pass it in a constitutionally proper way. John McCain, if he was alive, would still be working on this. It was a big passion for him. He wanted this problem fixed and an overhaul of the immigration system to make it work better. And I think we owe it to him to do that.
Okay, Frederick, you've heard the arguments. What are you thinking? What are you hearing? How are you reacting to these various arguments?
Okay, well, I don't really give a damn what the English common law says about immigration, but I do agree with Nick that it would be reasonable to have a statute of limitations. So if you if you can say, oh, I came in here 10 years ago or whatever the statute of limitations ends up being, you're home free.
Yeah,
it's not murder.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for that vote of approval. And let me just give you one example. 3 people walk in the room. One guy, what did you do? I robbed Fernando's house, stole all his money, and walked away. Person number 2, what'd you do? Well, I walked in. I was outside his house. I stabbed somebody, and then I walked away. Third person comes in. What'd you do? I crossed the border, and what I did is I picked cherries all my life, scrunging in the mud for 5 years. Each of them did this 5 years later. Well, the first 2, the statute of limitations apply. They walk. Even though they stabbed the person, they robbed his house, those 2 guys walk. The guy we put in deport is the person who's been a migrant worker for 5 bloody years because the statute of limitations doesn't apply to him. It's illegal to have him here. And that is not in pari materia with the crime. And so that law needs to be changed, sir.
Okay, I am sorry.
Okay, yes, I agree. The equities are relatively speaking on the side of the third guy, the cherry picking guy who stuck across the border 10 years ago or whatever.
The cherry picking guy is working without papers, being taken advantage of and depressing the economy by taking lower wages. So in fact, he is committing a theft at that point. That's number 1. Number 2, the burglar that comes into my house to steal money is coming out with nothing because I really don't have any money in the house. The guy that stabbed somebody in the street isn't going to walk scot-free in 5 years because it's going to be, if the person died, it's murder. If he didn't die, it's an attempted murder. So he's going to get prosecuted.
Maybe depending on how.
He's going to get prosecuted.
Maybe not.
The cherry picker is still committing a crime by taking a job where they know that he's here illegally. They know they can take advantage of him. They know they can pay him well under minimum wage. They know they can use him to depress the job market. So because he's never going to complain, that in itself is a crime like murder or any other crime.
It's a timeout.
And it's not that he's taking jobs away from Americans because Americans don't want those jobs. By nature, we're lazy and we don't want to do anything that we see that's beneath us. I don't have an issue with that guy picking cherries, but he should be doing it legally so that he gets paid a proper wage. He can become part of whatever farmers union there is or cooperative so that he doesn't get taken advantage of and he doesn't depress the market.
Nick and I aren't saying that what the guy did shouldn't be a crime. We're just saying you can't prosecute him, for something he did eons ago. At some point, we had to say, okay, you got away with it, just like the guy who robbed Fernando or even some more affluent person's house.
And by the way, that guy that robs houses eventually is going to get caught anyway. Because he's going to be a dummy and he's going to do something that's going to land him in jail. If you're criminal, the jails are full of criminals because they aren't intelligent.
Massive tax fraud in connection with his father's estate, as did his sister.
How do you know that?
Who was the federal judge.
How do you know that?
Well, the New York Times amply documented it. Trump didn't deny it. He
The
simply
New York
said,
liberal rag.
"Oh, that's old news."
I give the New York Times as much credibility as I do Griswold versus Connecticut.
And you know what, Fred? It wouldn't matter because the statute of limitations has passed.
Well, exactly. And what he did,
New York Times is
ripping the
printed
treasury off of probably hundreds of millions of dollars, is way more significant than the guy who snuck across the border.
And you should fix the tax code.
Assuming
Just
you can
because he
prove
has
that.
lawyers that can take advantage of the tax code doesn't mean he did something
that's
wrong.
another matter, right? I mean, there
But there's a
probably be a
statute
longer
there.
statute of limitations for tax fraud, but we could only deal with one thing at a time here. And
Well,
I'm totally with Jeff and Fernando as to the folks whose parents brought them over when they were kids. I mean, it's just outrageous and heartless to deport some kid to Mexico where he did nothing wrong. I mean, he could hardly say at age 3, "No, don't take me across the border, mom and dad." And it's heartless to deport him to a place where he may not even speak the language, and he certainly has no familiarity with the culture. So
Did he even have
for
men
sure,
there?
those people should get citizenship.
Well, no, fellas, I mean, I'm not sure. I think that Fernando, in his first showing from New York, has taken on North Carolina, taken on the shoulder city, Chicago, and found a home with Utah and Georgia. And I think he's won this debate. I think that's 3-2 in this decision. Look at that. And he's a first timer. He's putting you guys to shame, Nick. Aren't you embarrassed?
No, I'm not, because it doesn't negate the principle of the statute of limitations. It will never negate the principle of the statute of limitations. It exists in the Old English common law for a reason. It exists in the United States through the reception
If you want to understand the
statute.
Constitution, read the Federalist Papers, not old English law.
It exists.
See what Madison says.
It exists
See
in
what
the
Hamilton said,
state
who actually
law.
wrote the document.
Nick. I mean,
Where's Judge Judy when you need it? She's a smart lady. Let's bring in Judge Judy. See what she has.
We're here at the lawyers' den. But Nick, listen, on that point, you're actually doing well, like Fernando had said the other day, if you just kept your mouth shut, because invoking Old English, I mean, Frederick is against it, Fernando's against it, Adam's against it. Jeff makes a reasonable argument that we should at least know about it, but none of them are looking to enforce it. So you're out on an island, Nick.
But that's because you guys didn't go to Oxford like I did and study the law and the reception statutes that exist in every state in the United States except Louisiana. If you'd ever bother to read the reception statute, you'll see, and I know that Adam will go back to his professorship and go look at it and see that we have adopted the English common law in all states to the extent our laws are silent. It just doesn't apply to immigration law, which creates this mismatch that we just described, where the cherry picker goes to jail and the guy who committed tax fraud walks.
So you've been indoctrinated because you went to Oxford.
Ouch.
Oxford is one of the best universities in the country, sir.
Nick,
I had a professor in law school that was an Oxford graduate. Actually, was one of my favorites.
Ow. Okay, you see, you bring on a New York lawyer and he trounces the panel. That's 1. 2, we are running a bit low on time. However, I do want to point this out because this is what I find fascinating about this panel. And that is that a Southern professor from Georgia can find common ground with an esteemed scholar and attorney from Utah with an attorney from New York City. It's amazing. Look at the wide swath of America that we cover. See, we're not as different as people would say. I do disagree that the New York Times is a rag. Or what did you say, Fernando?
I called it a liberal rag. I've been
National
reading it
Enquirer?
since I was in high school because it was required reading for my history class and the science section for science class.
Okay, all right. Look, I'm going to plot some New York stuff, and I'm just going to say, listen, the threes of yous ought to back off because I just gave you a compliment here in the final second. And it takes a lot to get Nick to be for a moment. And now I get to turn it over to Nick. Now, what Nick is going to do, I don't know. But the threes of yous ought to just, take it when you can get it, at least on this episode. Nick, it is your turn. Can you, do you have any final thoughts, or do you want to land this plane?
No, my final thought is we're at the 2-minute warning and the football game's about to end here in the lawyer's den. So just let everybody know. So I have no other further comments. I hope that we read the reception statutes, and I'm sure our audience will go back and read the reception statutes and understand that we have, whether we like it or not, adopted the common law of Great Britain and England to the extent the U.S. law does not apply. Counselor.
And there you have it. So I guess I'll do this because Nick was on his soapbox and he might be falling down and hurting himself given his age and need Obamacare. So listen, for our audience, we thank all of you and we appreciate you because without you, this show could not function. And we hope that we've offered some humor, some laughs, some insights on the issue of the law and hear from the lawyer's den. Once again, it is my honor to co-host with Nick Palavita and our esteemed panelists, Jeff Teichert, Adam Lamparelli, Frederick Ryan, and now Fernando Leal representing the Big Apple, Nick, not the Big Banana. I think that you think you're the Big Banana. But for all of us here from IBM TV, have a great evening, and we will see you here tomorrow evening. All right.